Okay, so let's roll out our big old sheet of Play-Doh to cover our egg. Now, most of the time I just cover half of the egg and not the entire whole egg because you're only going to see the front of the egg. But I have done a couple, or maybe one video where I decorated the front and the back of the egg. So I will show you the front first, and then we'll see if I have enough to do the whole egg, and I'll show you how I do that. But so here are 4 of the big cans, these big tubs of Play-Doh, and normally normally I use the little tubs to cover my egg, and it takes about 5 to 6 of these to cover half of the egg. So it takes a lot more, and I have never covered the egg with the big bins yet, so we'll find out how many of these it takes. So what I like to do is kind of squeeze this together and kind of mold it with my hands a little bit. So I get it kind of like that, and then I start to roll it out. Now I have the medium size rings on here, and I just kind of start in the middle and work it back and forth, and I'll turn it. And this is kind of like a workout. It takes a little effort to roll out all this Play-Doh. And I'll, keep turning it a little bit, or I'll stand up and then hit it from different angles. Okay, so we got a pretty uniform thickness, and I think our shape is pretty good. Let's stick our egg on there. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So one thing I like to do after I put all my stuff in here, and I'm not going to put anything in this one, this is just a demo, but I like to tape it. I put a little tape on both sides just to keep it closed, and it just makes it easier for me to do it. You don't have to do that, but it helps me out. So now, to get the Play-Doh on the egg, there's a couple different ways you could do it. Oops. What I've been doing lately is I kind of grab the sheet kind of like this, get my hand under it, kind of lift it and flip it, and then we have it on our egg, and that works pretty good. So now this is kind of the hardest part for me. It's covering the egg and smoothing it out, but what I do is I kind of gently work these big folds and try to get them flatter, kind of like that, and then I grab my smoother downer, and the base is always kind of the hard part, but I'll get my smoother downer, and then I just kind of, I don't rub it really, I just kind of pat it, and it kind of smooths the Play-Doh into itself a little bit. And you'll get some folds, and see right there, I tore it right there on the bottom. I'm not too worried about that. What you could do is take a little bit and stick it in there and kind of just tap it. But since that's the bottom, I'm not super concerned. But these big folds, I try to break them into 2 folds maybe, those great big ones. And then, you know, I smooth it down. And you might crease it a little, like right here I creased it. But with the smoother downer, you can kind of work the crease into the Play-Doh and it becomes a lot less visible. Plus it's on the side, and you know, you're not going to really see the sides too much. So, and you can kind of work, you know, gently fold it and move the smoother downer, and see, we eliminated a lot of those fold marks. And I like using this because I don't get fingerprints all over my egg. And you know, you might not see them in the video, I don't know. It really bothered me when I had fingerprints all over the egg. I couldn't handle it, so, but this works really well. I like it. So we're working our egg around and smoothing it down. And we got a lot of, I don't know if you can see this, a lot of excess hanging off here. So I'm going to take one of my cutting tools and try to find around the middle of the egg and just slice off a lot of the excess. So here's our excess Play-Doh, and now, so you can kind of see we have half of it covered, and that clean line is where I trimmed off the excess. Now let's try to do a full egg, like cover the full egg. So what I'm going to do is trim off the rest of this kind of right in the middle. So we have now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we have roughly half the egg covered in Play-Doh. Can you see that? And it looks pretty nice on the front, and then the rest of it is uncovered, obviously. But I mean, you don't have to go any further than that, because right there, that's all you're ever going to really see. So you could stop, and that would be it. But for the demo, I will roll out the Play-Doh again. I don't know if we'll have enough, but I'll try. And we'll see if we can cover the other half. So I'll be right back when I get that rolled out. So I rolled out the rest of the purple Play-Doh, and I didn't think we were going to have enough if we used the medium thickness rings. So I went and put on the thin ones. So we have a real thin sheet. It's only this thick of Play-Doh. And I think this will cover it, but I wanted to just show you another way you can put the Play-Doh on the egg, and especially with the thin stuff, because it's a little trickier when you get this thin. So let me show you what I do. So if you put your roller down and then pick up very gently one edge and kind of roll it on top of the roller, and then without rolling it over, you can just kind of gently lift it, and the Play-Doh will kind of hang on the roller just like that. So now we have our Play-Doh there, and you have to be kind of quick with this so it doesn't tear, but so it's already kind of tearing. But now we can just kind of gently lay the Play-Doh on top of our egg, pull the roller out, and that works pretty good. That was a little tricky, but so if you're using the thin setting on the roller, that's a good way of doing it. So now we have the Play-Doh laying on our egg, and it started to tear a little bit, but It's okay. Now we just go and continue with the smoother downer and do the same thing. We just kind of smooth it down, and I'm holding, you know, the bottom of the egg, the Play-Doh we already put on, and trying to be careful not to get a ton of like fingerprints in it. And we're kind of working it into the first layer of Play-Doh. And of course, this does not have to be perfect. I mean, this is, we're talking about Play-Doh eggs, but you know, you can do it as perfect as you want or not. So we're kind of working it in. And now we have, you can see we have a hole right there. So I will kind of rip some off, cover our hole, gently kind of pat it in with the smoother downer. And we patched it pretty much. So, but now this is where I like to cut off the excess. So we've kind of covered the whole egg. And now if you can kind of find the center, I have kind of found the center with my knife. And then you cut around the edge, peel the excess off. And now we have a fairly clean line. There might be some Play-Doh underneath there, but I'm not too worried about that. I'll just let that go. And then kind of smooth it down with the smoother downer. And then on the base, we have our base here, and that's not too exciting or attractive. You can stick some extra Play-Doh in there, especially if you're going to set it on the base. You can stick some more Play-Doh on and then kind of use your smoother downer to get it nice and flat so it'll stand up really well. So it doesn't look the greatest, but it doesn't have to. So that's it. Now we have, get this out of the way. So there's kind of our full covered egg standing up, and you can kind of gently go with the smoother downer and get rid of the fingerprints and kind of get things nice. But I'd say that's pretty good. We're ready to continue with the next step. So the next thing I like to do is pick the colors I'm going to use for our character. Now with Cinderella we have a light blue and a darker blue. So here is the blue that I have, and this blue is a little bit darker than her dress, but I think it's okay. And here's the light blue. And the light blue, that's pretty close, I think. So, I mean, I think I'm going to go with this blue, and I think I'm going to go with this light blue. So I'll put those back. And one thing is, now Cinderella has like this lovely skin tone, and they don't make a Play-Doh skin tone. So I have created one that I had previously, and you can see it. It's a little bit lighter than Cinderella, but I'll show you how I make that, because that's kind of an important color. So let me wipe my fingers off real quick. You always want to wipe your fingers off so you don't contaminate your different colored Play-Doh, because that can, you know, really wreck things. So to make a skin tone, I take, you know, white, obviously, and then I take this pink color. And I'm not exactly sure what that is. It's like a peach color. And whenever I mix a color for the first time, I always take just a little bit, something like that, and then I'll take a little bit of the other color I'm going to mix with it, and maybe a little bit less. So I got some white, and then I have a little bit of that pink color. And then I just make a sample. And instead of trying to mix together a whole tin or 2 tins of Play-Doh and then the color's wrong, and then you wrecked your Play-Doh. Oh, so just make a little tiny sample, and you'll easily know if it's going to work or not. So right here I can tell, oh man, that's looking great. And that color looks a lot like Cinderella. Can you see that? That looks a lot like her skin tone. That's even better than the first color I had. So let's mix up a little bit more. And I'll take, actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this white alone. I'm going to take the color oops, that's not it. I'm going to take the color I had previously mixed and just make this a little darker. See, look how different this is. Let me make this a little flatter. So that looks pretty good, but this one looks a lot better. So I'm going to stick that in there, and then I'll just take a little more of this. I'd say maybe about that, and mix it in. And you can always mix a little bit at a time if you're worried about, wrecking it or anything. So I won't make you watch this. I'll come back when we're all done with this. So here we are, and I have it all mixed up, and I think it looks pretty good. Check it out. It looks almost just the same. So I'm really happy with that. And I even put a tiny bit of glycerin in there to make it a little smoother too. So I'll put that back in the tin and cover this one up. And then I looked at all my different yellows, and I only have this light yellow, which is way too light. And I mean, it could work, but it's really light. And I have a neon yellow, which looks just way too weird. And I have an orange. So, and that's way too orange. So I think I'm going to mix up a yellow. Now I'm going to take, again, I made a little sample. So I took a little bit of the orange and I took a little bit of the yellow, and take a look at the two. So this one has the orange in it, and it looks a lot more like Cinderella's hair than the regular yellow. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of yellow. And if you run out of tins, you could always put this in a Ziploc bag. So I'm going to take about half of this, and I'll just combine that. And then I'll take some orange. And again, I think I'll start conservatively. So I have a whole bunch of yellow and just a little bit of orange. But let's see what happens and not over mix it. So again, I'll be back in a second when I'm all done mixing this up. Okay, so here's our yellow, and I put a little bit more orange in, but not that much more. And it looks pretty close. It's not exact, but I mean, it's close enough. So, and again, I mean, we don't have to be perfect with this stuff. And I mean, it's just a Play-Doh egg, but the yellow was so different that I thought I had to mix some. And normally I don't like to mix up colors. I try to go with just regular standard colors, but in the case of Cinderella, the yellow was way too, it was too light, and we needed a flesh tone. So I think this looks great. So now let's get our first templates ready. And I'm going to put this off to the side. Now I'm going to use my cutting board with my cutting mat and take one of our templates. And normally when I'm looking at different characters, I try to see how I can build them in maybe 1 or 2 pieces. So to try to make the whole thing like at once and then maybe transfer it to the egg, that's so difficult, and it's all going to fall apart. So I think for this one, I'm going to make Cinderella's head and her hair, and then I'll make another piece out of her body. And I'll make her head first and put it on the egg, and then I'll make her body second and put that on the egg. So what we need to do now is cut this apart. So let me use my scissors, and we're just going to cut Cinderella's head out. And the earrings, I'm not going to even mess with them. I'm just going to cut right through them because we can stick those on afterwards. And you could even cut the hair off and add that separate. I think I'm going to just include it. Actually, I changed my mind. I'm going to cut the hair off and make that a separate piece, because then we'll be able to see that line much more clearly. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. Okay, so here's her head, and here's her hair. Let me put this off to the side. And let me move my cutting board. Okay, so now let's make this. Now what I'd like to do is, what's the main color going to be? And what I think I'm going to do is make the main color her flesh color and put the hair on top of it. That way it'll kind of look, and you're not going to really be able to see it, that the hair is on top of her face. So, that just makes sense to me. So let's get our flesh color, which is right here, and take some of that. And then now I'll use my little Play-Doh roller outer with the medium rings on it and just roll it out. And roll it in a couple different directions. You could flip it over. And is it big enough? Oh, it's just not quite big enough. We need a little bit more. Let's stick some right here. Now let's see. Now look at the back. See, I had that little crease in there. Let me show you again. I have this little crease right here. I don't know if you can see it, but if we flip it over, it's perfect. And that's because of this awesome high gloss table. So what I like to do now is I'll just move that in front. I'll lay, oh, that's just fitting. Oh my gosh. I'll lay her head on there just very delicately. And then I'll take my knife and trace around it. And this is where the super sharp plastic tool comes in really handy. And this is where a little dexterity is good too. So you just kind of trace around it, and then you just peel the Play-Doh off. And right away, I'm going to go up here where the hair is and lift the paper and peel the paper off as fast as you can, because the paper likes to absorb some of the water. You can see it's kind of buckling. It likes to absorb some of the water, and if you leave it on for too long, it will kind of stick to the Play-Doh. So it's kind of a time-sensitive thing. So now that we have that, let me put my Play-Doh away. And now let's make the hair. Now what I like to do for the hair is I'm just going to cut the hair out. And if your paper is too damp, you can always go to your other template and use that one. But I think I can get another use out of this. So now, but there's another thing here. So now we have the bow, right? So let me cut the bow out right away. And that's going to be blue. So to do that, I don't want to disrupt my Play-Doh. I'm going to just put my cutting mat here and grab my knife and very carefully, and this takes a little bit of practice to make these cuts. I'm going to cut out the bow. And you don't have to press down hard, and this is really sharp, so you have to be really, really careful, because you can get cut really easily, and it can get cut really badly. So if you have any apprehension about using the knife, don't use it. And if you're watching this and you're a child, then definitely don't use a knife. Get your mom or your dad to cut this out for you. Now, I just think I regret doing that, because now look, it's kind of floppy, and now it might be a little too hard to use as a template. But I'm going to try it anyway. So I have my little bow piece, and I'm going to take my yellow, and now I'm going to switch to my skinny rings. Okay, so now I'm going to roll this out with my skinny rings on my roller outer. Oops. And you got to be careful because of what I just did. If you get to the end and try to roll it back, a lot of times it likes to lift up and you'll rip your Play-Doh just like that. So, but it's no big deal. We just do this and roll it out again. And I try to roll from the middle outwards, and that's a bad habit of rolling it backwards. But and again, I'm rolling this really long. I don't know if it's going to be big enough. It's just big enough. Okay. So now I'll gently press that down and take my knife and trace around. And I'm not pressing hard at all. It goes through the Play-Doh really easily. And one thing I like to do, I'll start in the corner and then go all the way out, and then you can lift these parts up in pieces. It just lifts up like that. Now again, I want to get the paper and get it off as fast as I can. Cool, so now we have our hair shape, and we have to put it on our head shape. So one thing I'll do, I'll take my other template and maybe just set it there so I have a reference to look at to get the angle of the hair right. So I'll kind of lift it with this big flat piece very carefully so you don't rip it. Very carefully peel it up, and then now we have to drop it on. And one thing is, when the Play-Doh, when you're handling it, it's going to kind of stretch out a little bit in your hands, but don't worry about that, because once we put it on our, on our other shape, like this, we can kind of gently finesse it to where we need it. Now I'm going to take this other tool and kind of just move the Play-Doh, and then you can kind of tap it to get it flat. And see, now I have that little piece hanging out here, right there, which I don't want, so I'm going to carefully cut it off. Okay, so now we have put our hair on Cinderella, and you can kind of tap this around to, to make it round again and flatten it out. Now the next piece we're going to do is the bow. Now let's get our bow shape here. And the bow shape is going to kind of just sit on there like that. But it's kind of hard to like put that exactly where it's going to be. So I'll show you a trick. So let's get our Play-Doh out. And let's roll it out, and be careful you don't roll over your existing Play-Doh. Okay, so now let's lay this on here. Oops. Upside. No, that's right. Just like that. And cut it out. And just, tracing these shapes, it's so much easier than trying to do this freehand. And of course, at least it is for me. Because when you're working with the Play-Doh, as the longer it takes, it's getting hard. And, when I'm doing it to film a video. So the faster I can get the egg done, the better. Because then I can get onto the fun stuff, opening it up. So I'll put my blue back in there. And again, now one thing I'm going to show you. This is such a tiny and it's a long and skinny piece. So if I pull the paper off right now and then try to lift this, it's going to want to stretch out. So I'm going to leave the paper on there. I know I told you not to, but I'm going to leave it on there for right now. Now what I'm going to do is gently place the template kind of just roughly in the same spot on top of my hair, and then I'm going to carefully pick the blue up, and see the paper is kind of holding it together now, and I'm going to get it in roughly the right spot. And I just used this paper template just as a ballpark, and then I'll kind of peel it off. Sometimes it's easier to do than others, and boom, there we go. And it's pretty much in the right spot. I think that looks pretty good. I'll gently tap it down, and now I'll find an edge and peel the paper back off. So that's a good little trick for these like long, skinny shapes. You can leave the paper on for a moment to help you place it, and it'll keep it kind of intact. Cool, so now we have our hair and we have our bow. Now we need to make her eyes, and then we can stick it on our egg. So for her eyes, what I'm going to do is cut her eyes out and just use this as a rough template to put them where I think they need to go. So again, I'll use my knife, and please be careful with using any kind of knife. And I have used a knife for many years, so I'm pretty good at it. Now you don't have to do this. I could probably, put the eyes and locate them fairly accurately, but this is just a nice little safety device, safety trick. And I'm not gonna, use these and cut out little tiny circles for the eyes. I'm gonna take Play-Doh and make two little spheres that are about the same size. This one's a little too big, but that are smaller than the eyes, because I'm going to kind of push them down and they're going to expand, so I don't want them to get too big. So I think that looks pretty good. So I have these two little balls of Play-Doh, and I'm going to stick this right back on for a second. And I'm going to just dab the eye in there, and then put this one on. And then I'm going to peel this off carefully. And then I'm going to tap these down until they're the right size. And then you could always, if you really want to check, put that back there. I think that looks pretty good. So now we have her eyes, and you'll notice on the key ring, it might be so hard to see. You can see it probably better on the, let me get my printout. You can see it on the printout. She has these little tiny, right here, they almost look like eyelashes. And we could put that on there. I'll try to do it. I'll show you how to do it. But I just kind of cut that in with a knife. So I'll show you how to do that. So I'll take just my really sharp knife and then try to find out where those go, and then just very carefully kind of draw them in there. You probably won't even be able to see them on the camera, but they look pretty good. So you can draw with this too, and it's a very good drawing device, and we'll be using this in a little bit. So now we have her eyes. Now we need to put in her pupils. So we need some white. So now we need the tiniest little dot of white, and I mean tiny. So you can kind of see that. It's so tiny. And then I'm gonna just, where'd it go? Gently. And one thing you can do is you can kind of grab it with the tip of your knife or your cutter, and then just gently press it on there like that. Pop it on there, press it down just a little. Yes, perfect. This one's a little bit big now. I'm gonna just press this one down a little bit more, make it a little bit bigger. That looks pretty good. So we have her head done. Oh, we have one more thing to do, her mouth. So now for her mouth, you can use, if you could find any kind of stamp or anything, that's hard to do, but I'm going to try to draw it on there with my knife. So again, you could do this. I could cut this out carefully, and then I'll just cut like a U. So it's just like a hole, but now I can find out exactly where her mouth goes. And you might be thinking, wow, this is like super ridiculously tedious. And it is kind of, but you can make it as tedious or as untedious as you want. I mean, you don't have to do all this. So now you can kind of trace the mouth with your knife and pull this back, and there it is. It's a little it's kind of in the wrong spot. So, but I mean, these are all just little tricks and stuff. You can use them or you don't have to use them. I'm just showing you some of the things that I use and some of the things I do. Now, let's put Cinderella on our egg. So what I do now is I'll lift this up carefully and move all the Play-Doh out of the way. Pull the egg over and position it right where I want it. So I want it kind of not all the way at the top, kind of right here. Oh, but I got to remember she's got that hair on top, so I have to make room for that. Where's that hair? Will that work? I think that will work. So right there, and then I'll just kind of press her down. And you don't have to press super hard, just very gently. And that's it. Now we have Cinderella on our egg. And now we'll make her hair, and then we'll get her body. So move her off.